I never thought a champagne toast could taste so bitter until my father-in-law raised his glass on what would become the most humiliating night of my life. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was sitting in the private dining room of the country club I'd been quietly financing for the past 6 months, listening to Richard Blackwood systematically destroy my husband's future while dessert grew cold on our plates. The evening had started pleasantly enough. Richard had called David that morning, his voice unusually warm over the speakerphone in our kitchen. "Son, I'd like you and Alana to join me for dinner tonight. There are some family matters we need to discuss." David's face had lit up with hope, and I'd felt that familiar pang of protectiveness. After 8 years of marriage, I'd watched my husband desperately seek his father's approval, each rejection chipping away at his confidence like water wearing down stone. I'd chosen my outfit carefully that evening. A navy blue dress that conveyed professionalism without ostentation, paired with the simple pearl earrings David had given me for our anniversary. As a private equity partner who'd spent 15 years building my reputation on discretion and strategic thinking, I understood the importance of reading a room before entering it. But nothing could have prepared me for what Richard had planned. The Willowbrook Country Club dining room exuded old money sophistication, with its mahogany paneling and crystal chandeliers casting warm light over tables where business deals were born and family legacies shaped. Richard held court at our corner table like the petroleum industry titan he'd once been, his silver hair perfectly styled, his Armani suit tailored to perfection. Even at 72, he commanded attention, a skill that had built Blackwood Energy from a small Texas drilling operation into a multi-million-dollar empire. "Alana, you look lovely tonight," Richard said as we settled into our seats, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Though I have to say, that dress must have cost more than most people make in a month. David's certainly keeping you in style." The comment landed just as it was meant to, a subtle reminder that in Richard's mind I was an expensive liability rather than an asset. David shifted uncomfortably beside me, already sensing the undercurrent of tension I'd learned to navigate in the Blackwood family dynamic. "Actually, it's from a consignment shop downtown," I replied smoothly, which was technically true. The fact that I bought it new from Nordstrom and donated it to that same consignment shop the next day before buying it back was information Richard didn't need. "I believe in being practical with spending." Richard's laugh was sharp. "Practical? Yes, I'm sure you've had to learn that skill." He opened his leather portfolio with the ceremony of a judge delivering a verdict. "Which brings me to why I wanted to speak with you both tonight." David leaned forward eagerly, and my heart clenched watching the hope written across his features. My husband was brilliant. His doctoral thesis on renewable energy integration had been published in 3 major journals. But years of his father's dismissive treatment had left him hungry for any scrap of paternal approval. "Dad, if this is about me joining the company again, I've been thinking." "This isn't about the company, son," Richard said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "This is about the family legacy and my growing concerns about your priorities." The way he said priorities while glancing at me made my skin crawl. But I maintained my composed expression. In boardrooms from Houston to Manhattan, I learned that showing emotion was often the same as showing weakness. Richard pulled out a thick document, the legal letterhead visible even from across the table. "I've been reviewing my estate planning and I've made some difficult decisions about the family trust." David's face went pale. "Dad, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about protecting what 3 generations of Blackwood men have built." Richard's eyes fixed on me with undisguised hostility. "Your grandfather started this family's fortune with nothing but determination and Texas crude. Your Uncle Charles died in a drilling accident to keep this company running during the recession of '91. This legacy means something, David. It represents sacrifice and tradition." I felt the trap closing around us but kept my expression neutral. Years of managing hostile takeovers had taught me to stay calm when opponents revealed their strategies. "I understand the importance of family legacy," I said carefully. "David talks about his grandfather's stories all the time." "Does he?" Richard's smile was razor sharp. "Then you'll understand why I can't allow that legacy to be compromised." He slid the document across the table to David, whose hands shook as he picked it up. I watched my husband's face crumble as he read, each line dealing another blow to the man I've fallen in love with for his kindness and intelligence. "Dad, this removes me from the family trust entirely." David's voice was barely a whisper. Everything goes to Charles's kids instead. Your cousins understand what it means to marry within their class, Richard said, his tone conversational as if discussing the weather. They chose partners who complement their social standing rather than what you chose. The insult hit its mark, but I've been expecting it. Richard had never bothered hiding his disdain for my background. The daughter of immigrants who built a successful restaurant chain through 16-hour days and unwavering determination. In his mind, I was everything wrong with modern America, ambitious, foreign-born, and worst of all, richer than his son. Richard, I began, but he cut me off with a wave of his hand. Please, Elena, let me finish. He leaned back in his chair, clearly savoring his moment of control. David, your decision to marry outside your social circle was concerning enough. But watching you become domesticated by someone whose primary qualification seems to be her ability to spend money, well, it's become impossible to ignore. David's jaw tightened. Elena isn't. Elena is exactly what she appears to be, Richard continued, his voice rising just enough to command attention from neighboring tables. A beautiful woman who recognized an opportunity and seized it. I don't fault her for that. I admire ambition. But I won't allow my family's fortune to become her personal shopping fund. The dining room felt impossibly quiet despite the soft murmur of conversation from other tables. I was acutely aware of the crystal water glasses, the crisp white tablecloth, the oil painting of some long-dead Texan politician hanging behind Richard's head. Every detail etched itself into my memory as I processed the magnitude of what was happening. You're disinheriting me, David said, the words falling like stones into still water. Because of who I married. I'm protecting the family assets from someone who sees them as her personal inheritance. Richard's eyes fixed on me with calculating coldness. Face it, son. You married a gold digger who's been planning this moment since she met you. The expensive dinners, the designer clothes, the luxury vacations, she's been positioning herself to inherit everything I've worked for. The accusation should have stung, but I'd heard variations of it for 8 years. What hurt was watching David's shoulders slump, seeing him believe, even for a moment, that his father might be right. You don't know what you're talking about, David said, but his voice lacked conviction. Richard opened his phone and began scrolling through what appeared to be financial documents. Don't I? Let's see, your joint checking account shows monthly expenditures of over $15,000. Your credit card bills include charges to stores I've never heard of and restaurants that cost more than most people's mortgages. And this, he slid his phone across the table, showing a photograph of our house. A $4 million home in River Oaks that you certainly couldn't afford on your professor's salary. I watched David's reflection in the phone screen, saw him trying to process information that painted our entire marriage as an elaborate financial scheme. The irony was so thick I almost laughed. Richard was absolutely right about one thing. David couldn't afford our lifestyle on his university salary. What he didn't know was that David had never paid for any of it. Richard, I said quietly, I think you're making some assumptions. I'm making observations based on facts. He retrieved his phone and sat back, the picture of patriarchal authority. My son has changed since marrying you, Elena. He's become soft, entitled, disconnected from the values that built this family's success. And now I'm supposed to hand over everything my father and I created to someone who's clearly been planning to inherit it from day one. The server approached our table hesitantly, clearly sensing the tension. Richard waved him away without breaking eye contact with me. So here's what's going to happen, he continued, his voice dropping to a conversational tone that somehow felt more threatening than shouting. David, you have a choice. You can continue this marriage and live comfortably on your academic salary. Or you can remember where you come from and what you stand to lose. David's face had gone completely white. Dad, you can't be serious. I'm dead serious. Richard folded the estate documents and returned them to his portfolio. Your wife has had 8 years to prove me wrong about her motivations. Instead, she's proven me right at every turn. The expensive tastes, the social climbing, the way she's isolated you from family traditions. It's textbook gold-digging behavior. I felt something cold and sharp crystallize in my chest. Not anger. I'd moved beyond anger years ago when Richard first made it clear I wasn't welcome in his family. This was something more calculating, more precise. The same feeling I got in board meetings when competitors revealed their strategies without realizing they just handed me the keys to defeat them. I understand your concerns, I said, my voice steady despite the emotional carnage happening around our table. Family legacy is important. Financial security matters. I can see why you'd want to protect what you've built. Richard's eyebrows rose slightly, clearly surprised by my reasonable tone. I'm glad you understand. I do. I reached for my water glass, buying myself a moment to think. But I'm curious about something. When you say you're protecting the family assets, are you referring to Blackwood Energy specifically or the broader family holdings? All of it, Richard said firmly. The company, the real estate investments, the trust funds, everything my father and I built. I nodded thoughtfully. And those assets are currently valued at what, roughly $50 million? Richard's chest puffed with pride. Closer to 60, actually, though I'm surprised you know those figures. Oh, I make it my business to understand financial situations that might affect my husband's future. I set down my water glass with deliberate care. It's just that, well, I've been looking at some interesting investment opportunities lately, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't stepping on any family toes. David looked between us, confusion replacing some of his devastation. Richard, however, had gone very still. What kind of investment opportunities? He asked slowly. I smiled, the same smile I used in negotiations when I was about to reveal the information that would change everything. Well, it's fascinating, really. About 6 months ago, my firm started receiving some very attractive offers to purchase distressed energy company debt. Nothing major, you understand, just small portfolios of accounts receivable and equipment loans. But when we started researching the companies involved, Richard's face had begun to change color. Richard, are you feeling all right? I asked with genuine concern. You look a bit pale. What companies? His voice was barely above a whisper. I opened my purse and pulled out my phone, scrolling through documents with the casual air of someone discussing weekend plans. Oh, let's see. There was Patterson Drilling Services. Apparently they're owed about $2 million in unpaid invoices. Hartwell Equipment Leasing. That was a big one. Nearly $4 million in outstanding lease agreements. And then there were the smaller ones. Rodriguez Trucking, Mitchell Safety Systems, Coastal Pipe Supply. Each name hit Richard like a physical blow. David was staring at me with dawning understanding. But I kept my attention focused on my phone screen. The interesting thing about buying distressed debt, I continued conversationally, is that you get it for pennies on the dollar. A $2 million account receivable might only cost $300,000 to purchase. It's quite profitable, assuming you have the resources to pursue collection. Elena, David breathed. What are you saying? I looked up at my husband with the love I'd felt for him since our first date 8 years ago. Love that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with the way he brought me coffee in bed every morning and remembered to call my mother on her birthday. I'm saying that Blackwood Energy currently owes my investment firm approximately $18 million in debt that we've been purchasing over the past 6 months. I turned to Richard, whose complexion had gone from pale to gray. I'm also saying that your company has been systematically defaulting on payments to vendors while using those funds to maintain the appearance of profitability. The silence that followed was deafening. Other diners continued their conversations, unaware they were witnessing the collapse of a family empire at table 12. That's impossible, Richard whispered. You can't. You wouldn't have access to that information. Richard, I've been managing private equity investments for 15 years. Did you really think I wouldn't research my husband's family business? I pulled up another document on my phone. Your company's credit rating has been declining for 3 years. You've been shuffling payments between accounts to avoid bankruptcy, using new vendor credit to pay old vendor debts. It's a classic shell game. David was staring at his father with a mixture of shock and horror. Dad, is this true? Richard's composure finally cracked. The energy sector has been challenging. The energy sector has been challenging for everyone. I interrupted gently, but most companies don't respond by systematically defrauding their suppliers while maintaining expensive country club memberships and luxury car payments. I scrolled to another screen, showing Richard financial documents that made his face go completely white. Your personal expenses over the past year total nearly $2 million. That's remarkable for someone whose company is supposedly struggling to pay its bills. How do you have access to this information? Richard's voice was barely controlled. Because 3 months ago, when it became clear that Blackwood Energy was never going to voluntarily pay its debts, my firm initiated legal proceedings to collect. I set my phone on the table between us. These are the asset seizure orders that will be served tomorrow morning. David reached for my phone with shaking hands, scrolling through legal documents that painted a picture of financial fraud spanning several years. Richard sat frozen. The man who'd been so confident in his family's superiority, now faced with the reality of his own systematic deception. "You're taking everything," Richard said, his voice hollow. "The company, the equipment, the real estate holdings." "I'm collecting legally owed debts," I corrected. "Debts that you created by taking goods and services without payment. The fact that collecting those debts will effectively dissolve your company is an unfortunate side effect of your business practices." The waiter appeared at our table again, clearly concerned by the tension. "Is everything all right here?" "Actually," I said, standing and gathering my purse, "I think we're finished. David, are you ready to go?" My husband stood slowly, still processing everything he'd learned. Richard remained seated, staring at the legal documents on my phone screen. "Elena," Richard's voice stopped me as I turned to leave. "What do you want?" I looked back at him. This man who'd spent 8 years treating me like an opportunistic interloper, who'd just attempted to destroy his own son's future out of spite and prejudice. "I want you to understand something, Richard. Every expensive dinner you criticize, I paid for it. Every luxury vacation you resented, I planned and funded it. Our house, our cars, David's ability to pursue his research without worrying about money, all of it came from my income, not your family fortune." Richard's mouth opened and closed without sound. "David didn't marry a gold digger," I continued, my voice steady but filled with 8 years of suppressed emotion. "He married someone who makes more money in a month than your company has seen in profit over the past 3 years. Someone who's been quietly supporting your family's lifestyle while you convinced yourself we were living off your generosity." I walked around the table and placed my hand on Richard's shoulder, feeling him flinch at the contact. "You want to protect the family legacy? Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, when the asset seizure begins, I'm going to offer to purchase Blackwood Energy's remaining assets for fair market value. I'm going to restructure the debt, pay the suppliers you've been cheating, and turn it into a profitable business again." Richard looked up at me with naked fear in his eyes. And then I'm going to transfer ownership to David, along with a trust fund that will ensure he never has to worry about your approval again." I smiled, and for the first time all evening, it was genuine. "Consider it a wedding gift, 8 years late, but worth the wait." David moved to my side, his hand finding mine with the instinctive trust that had carried us through 8 years of his father's manipulation. "Elena, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." I squeezed his hand, feeling the wedding ring I'd bought for him with money I'd earned through years of careful investment and strategic thinking. "Your father was right about one thing: family legacy matters. It's time we started building our own." 6 weeks later, I sat in the conference room of what was now Blackwood Martinez Energy, reviewing quarterly reports with David and our newly hired management team. The company's debt had been restructured, vendor relationships restored, and we'd already secured 3 major drilling contracts that would ensure profitability for the next 5 years. Richard had moved to a smaller house in West University, his country club membership canceled, and his luxury car returned to the dealership. He'd initially threatened legal action, but his lawyers quickly explained that his signature was on every fraudulent vendor agreement, making him personally liable for millions in damages he couldn't possibly pay. The environmental impact study for the West Texas project came back clean, David said, sliding the report across our conference table. "We can break ground next month." I smiled at my husband, who'd thrown himself into learning the energy business with the same passion he'd once reserved for academic research. Removing the weight of his father's disapproval had unleashed a confidence I'd always known was there. "What about your father?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. David's expression grew thoughtful. "He called yesterday, asked if we might have dinner soon. And I told him we'd be happy to meet him at that diner on Westheimer, the one my mom used to take me to when I was little." David grinned. He said he'd never eaten at a place like that. I laughed, remembering the man who'd once criticized my consignment chalk dress while living on credit stolen from honest suppliers. I think it's time he learned. Through the conference room window, I could see downtown Houston's skyline, a testament to the kind of ambition and hard work that had built my own success. Richard had been wrong about nearly everything, but he'd been right about one thing: legacy mattered. The difference was that real legacy wasn't inherited, it was earned, one decision at a time.